Hello all and welcome to the Hungry Heracross, where we rank, analyze and create Zelda and Pokemon. Today we are ranking all the mini-bosses in Link's Awakening, starting with the worst and working our way up to what I consider to be the best mini-boss in the game. Mini-bosses in the Zelda series often act as a challenge you face halfway through a dungeon. At times they pose as the final hurdle before you receive a key item, or they serve as a test of your recently acquired abilities and weapons, a precursor to a dungeon's final boss. Other times, you'll find them out in the overworld, guarding a key at the end of a side quest. They are usually quick fun fights that add depth to the game. Whilst Link's Awakening's mini-bosses aren't as iconic as Skirvo or Dark Link, there are a few that would be in contention for the best mini-boss in the series. To formulate this list, I'm considering design, battle, character and setting. It's all just a bit of fun to look at all the mini-bosses in this game, so if your favourite doesn't rank as high as you'd like, use the comment section to convince me why it should have placed higher. For the purpose of this video, we're going to be referring to models used in the Switch remake, just because it looks nicer and it's easier to record game footage. The fights are pretty similar across all versions of the game, but for some reason they changed the mini-boss names, so hopefully it's not too confusing if I refer to older names throughout the video. So, with 9 unique mini-bosses across the 8 main dungeons, the 2 Color Dungeon mini-bosses, and the 5 Overworld bosses, we have a total of 16 mini-bosses to rank. So, let's get to it. You know when Zelda fans say that everything in the series is awesome, except for maybe 1 or 2 outliers? Well, this is one of those. The Dongo Snakes is hands down the worst mini-boss in Link's Awakening, and you could argue the case for it being the worst in the series, but we'll save that for another video. I generally try not to be too negative, but the Dongo Snakes don't really have many redeeming qualities. To defeat them, you place a bomb in front of its mouth and hope that they eat the bomb, which explodes inside of them. Rinse, repeat, twice because there's 2 of them. It gets quite tiresome, and just waiting for the snakes to get into position where you can throw a bomb and waiting for them to hopefully eat the bomb is just really boring. It's not an enjoyable battle. It saps all the momentum that you've built prior, and there's no fun, there's no challenge. And what makes it worse is you have to face this pair of snakes multiple times throughout the game. Look, I'm not opposed to repeated battles in general, but when you've got to face the worst part of the game 3 times, it's not great. They're also not great to look at visually, so that's another strike against them. But the first time you do face them, you use the bomb, which is a dungeon item. So look, there's the obligatory positive. Let's move on. Cue fits the mold of a lot of Zelda bosses that have an obvious weak point and chase you around the room. To defeat this one, you need to slash its back, and you can either do this by chasing it around using the Pegasus boots, or you can jump over it using the Rock's Feather. I like having multiple methods for how to defeat the boss, but I'm not a fan of the room it takes place in, and I don't love the way this mini-boss looks. It's not a horrible fight, it's not a horrible boss, but it doesn't have any appealing attributes to make this a better fight than anything other than the Dongo Snakes, which we've already covered. The Ball and Chain Soldier is found in the Canalet Castle side quest, and whilst it looks intimidating and is enjoyable to fight, it really just feels like a regular enemy. So much so that I was debating whether or not to include it in this list, but I've seen it listed as a mini-boss in a few places, so it makes the cut. We've seen the Ball and Chain Soldier before in A Link to the Past, and they're a fantastic enemy. I love the way they look and function, especially in this 2019 remake. The battle itself takes place in a relatively small space, so you've got about half a screen to work with to move around, dodge the attacks. It's a welcome challenge, and it feels quite reasonable for where you're at in the game. If maybe the soldier was a bit bigger than the regular soldiers, or had some other ways to make it feel more of a mini-boss and less of a regular enemy, then this would be a little bit higher on the list. The first of the Color Dungeon mini-bosses, and wow, talk about a mini-boss matching the theme of the dungeon. I love how this changes from blue to red to green throughout the battle, and it just looks amazing. Really colourful and vibrant. Unfortunately, the battle itself is a little bit lackluster. I like how it's a blob and it turns into a choo-choo, but at the end of the day, it's just another slasher with the sword and a pretty straightforward fight. Nothing too challenging, and look, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just nothing too special to elevate it any higher up the list. Those colours though. As you progress through the game in your quest for the angler key, you come across some quicksand in the desert, and it's here that you're greeted with a familiar face in the desert land Molar. This is a boss from the Link to the Past, which has been downgraded to a mini boss in this game. Overall, the mini boss is okay. Nothing too special. It pops out of the sand, it's got a weak point on its head which you need to slash with your sword. You know the drill by now. The added challenge you have with this battle compared to others is the quicksand, which is quite fun to play around. Often at times, you want to run towards the center and slash the land Molar, but you also have to avoid getting sucked into the sand. It's not too difficult, but it's a nice fun challenge. Aesthetically, land Molar looks alright. Again, nothing too special, but nothing too offensive. We'll move on. You've just finished the first dungeon and you're feeling really good, ready to see what the rest of the game has to offer. But as you head into the village, chaos ensues. The kids are losing their mind because someone has stolen Bow Wow. And everyone loves Bow Wow. So as you complete your civic hero duties to bring justice to this pet stealing thief, you come face to face with the next mini boss on this list, King Moblin. King Moblin does a better job than the ball and chain soldier at distinguishing itself as a boss rather than a regular enemy. With its horned helmet, leather jacket and larger frame, it does fit the stereotypical small-time criminal look, which ties quite nicely into the story. The battle, however, is just a bit too silly. The pet thief just charges at you, but when you move out of the way, it runs into the wall, confusing itself and leaving it exposed to attacks. There is a presence of goofiness throughout the game that adds to that overall charm, but it's overdone here in this boss fight. Look, the fight's still alright, everything about this is good, but just being good isn't quite enough to cut the top 10. Coming in at number 10 in this list is another overworld boss and another returning villain in the Armistice. The Armistice is found in the Southern Face Shrine, and they hold the face key which you need to enter the face shrine, and that's a lot of face references for something that initially hides its face from you. The battle itself takes place in a narrow corridor, so similar to the ball and chain soldier, you have limited space to move around, which adds to the challenge. The Armistice will attack you by jumping at you, so you need to avoid getting hit, but you also need to avoid being on the ground when the Armistice lands on the ground, otherwise you're going to get stunned. Luckily, you've got the Rock's Feathers, so this should be fine. You can shoot arrows at the knight, or you can slash it with your sword. Either way, a few hits and it's defeated. Design-wise, the Armistice looks really imposing from the start. It towers over Link with a massive shield, horned helmet and really big blue armor. However, after a few hits, you knock off its helmet to reveal a face underneath, and that's a little less menacing. It would have been nice to see what it looks like with all the armor removed during the course of the battle, but it's still a decent mini-boss fight. To enter the 8th level of the game, Turtle Rock, you need to defeat the mini-boss of the same name. When you first approach Turtle Rock, it looks like some fancy architecture on the cliff, but once you play your tune, you get a really cool scene of the mini-boss awakening, ready to see if you have what it takes to enter its dungeon. The battle starts off as a harder King Moblin fight really, where you need to dodge its lunging attack so that the mini-boss hits its head, becomes dazed for a few seconds, and gives you an opportunity to strike. You'll need to use your bombs initially to crack its hard exterior and reveal its vibrant green head. From there, it's time to slash away until the turtle's no more. It's a nice fun fight with a well-designed boss. It's what you'd expect from a middle-of-the-road mini-boss. In 8th spot, we have another iconic Zelda enemy in the Henox, a mini-boss that's just looking for someone special to hold tight and then throw across the room. Whilst we all enjoy a warm embrace, this isn't the time or place for Link. Thankfully, it's not too difficult to dodge the Henox's advancements and then slash him back with your sword. A relatively easy fight, which is okay given it's the second dungeon, and really, this is the foundation for how other boss fights are going to work. Dodge the attack, hit them back. You do fight the Henox again in later dungeons where it starts to throw bombs as well, but you've got the bow at this point. and you can just shoot down the Henox really easy, and it makes those later Henox fights probably the easiest mini-boss battles in the game. I do think this is the best reiteration of the Henox aesthetically. It's got a well-defined body with a slightly goofy, slightly cheeky face, and I'm a big fan of it. With a title like Stone Henox, I was expecting a repeat of the regular Henox fight, just with an increased difficulty. Thankfully, that's not the case, and it's a completely different battle. Rather than chase you around the room, the Stone Henox will jump up and down, which causes rocks to fall from the ceiling. You need to avoid this debris as you make your way towards the stone beast to slash them with your sword. Similar to the Armor Knight, if you're on the ground when the Stone Henox lands on the ground, you'll be stunned and unable to move for a short period. Whilst I prefer the design of the standard Henox, I do quite like the stone counterpart, even though it feels more like an ancient golem than a plated Henox, but it still looks cool. All in all, it's quite a fun fight that you have to think your way through, and one I enjoy each time I play the game. In 6th spot we have a classic Zelda enemy in Gomer. It's another fantastic design, and I really like how prominent the eye looks against its red body. The battle is interactive and quite enjoyable. To defeat Gomer, you need to hit it in its eye with either the arrow, sword, or hookshot, which is true for most of the Gomer fights. However, Gomer only opens its eye very briefly to shoot a green beam at you, so you need to use the skills you've acquired to this point to block the beam with your shield and then fire off an attack before the Gomer closes its eye again. The Gomer will also approach you, which is another aspect that you need to deal with. Whilst I really like the battle and I enjoy the upgrade in difficulty from the previous mini-boss battles, sometimes the wait for Gomer to open its eye can be quite excessive. This detracts from the fun of the battle, and although in my playthroughs this hasn't been a big issue, it has affected a lot of friends, so I factored that into this ranking. Grim Creeper is arguably the most memorable enemy in the game, being involved in both the mini-boss and final boss battles of Eagle's Tower. It's got a great design and a name that plays off the Grim Reaper, and it has some of the best dialogue in the game. So why isn't this topping the list? Well, the battle's a bit underwhelming. You don't fight the Grim Creeper as such, it just sends out its 6 bat friends to attack you instead. The bats will fly at you one by one, and to defeat them, you just need to hit all 6 bats one after the other without missing any. If you manage to succeed, that's it. No second phase, no fights with the Grim Creeper, just knock out 6 bats and it's done. If you do happen to miss even a single bat, then all 6 will return and you have to try it again. The bats do change up their formation slightly after each failed attempt, which is a positive. Look, the fight is harder than it sounds, and some days it feels like one bat just keeps avoiding your sword. But other times, you can walk into the room, swing your sword 6 times without moving tiles, and the fight's over. So I don't feel this is enough of a challenge for the second last mini-boss in the game. I would have loved to see a second phase where you fought the bats in a different way, or even better, you actually fought the Grim Creeper. The battle just needed something else. It felt incomplete. I know it might be a bit harsh for the 5th best mini-boss on the list, but when you pair one of the best designed enemies in the game with a subpar battle, it's a recipe for a missed opportunity. As far as opening mini-bosses in the series go, Rolling Bones has to be right up there with some of the best. The battle itself is a simple premise, executed really well. You use the dungeon item, the Rock's Feather, to jump over a log of spikes, and you use your sword to slash at the mini-boss. It's a great way to introduce the player to how the boss and mini-boss fights work in this game, and I think they nailed the difficulty level of this first fight perfectly. I'm really fond of Rolling Bones' design too. The pink blob doesn't look like it can physically hurt you through punches or elemental attacks, so it makes sense that they would roll this giant log covered in spikes at you. It makes sense that they would run away from you when you slash at them, getting back behind their spike log for protection. It's a great design, a fun battle, and an amazing name. Taking out third in this list is Blano, the boxing fiend who lives in Turtle Rock. Before the Switch remake, I always thought that Blano looked like a penguin, based on his Oracle of Seasons and Link's Awakening DX sprites. But here, he looks more like a masked angry man with a dad bod. Don't let that physique fool you though, because Blano can fire off quick punches which you'll need to avoid. It'll also go for a big wind-up punch, and if this connects, it'll knock you out of the room. The Switch version just knocks you to the room prior, but in the original game, you'd be knocked back right to the start of the dungeon. The punishment for being hit by Blano's main attack makes you as the player think through the fight, rather than just button mash your way through it. As well as dodging all the punches, you also need to attack this boxer, and you can only do this by hitting them with your sword. However, if you hit Blano front on, it'll block your attack with its gloves. So, you either need to hit him when he exposes his chest after a punch, or try and hit him from behind. All of this combined makes for a rewarding battle, and I'd love to see another Blano cameo in a future Zelda title. Straight up, Smasher looks amazing, and I need a Smasher plushie in my life. The Switch remake turned this mini-boss from an okay looking creature into one of the best looking enemies in the series. I love how it uses its flipper-like arms to pick up its ball, and the way it moves around the room with its bouncy tail is just adorable. So not only is the design beautiful, but the battle is also hella fun. Smasher doesn't shoot beams at you or isn't going to bite you to death like most enemies, but you're in its house and it doesn't like it. So to stop you, Smasher does its best and throws this massive ball at you. As soon as it's either hit you or you've managed to dodge the ball, Smasher bounces its way over to the ball to pick it up and try and hit you again. It's on a mission and I love it. But then you get the ball, and poor Smasher's like, shit, I've got to run, and it's doing its best to get out of there quick smart. I feel this mini-boss really encompasses the charm of Link's Awakening perfectly, but there's one mini-boss that's just a little bit better. So we started this list with arguably the worst mini-boss in the series, but we're ending it with one of the best, Master Stealtho. Now on paper, this sounds pretty average. You burst a slight upgrade on a regular enemy from a previous game in the series. Logic says this should be an average fight, but it just works. Let's start with the design. Master Stealtho just looks awesome. From its face, to its stance, to its movement, everything about Master Stealtho looks cool and menacing. You fight the Stealtho in a really beautiful open room, and you've got these tiles arranged in the shape of a skull, and it just looks fantastic. The fight itself, look, it's a pretty standard Stealtho fight. You dodge, you slash, you bomb, you repeat. But the way you need to move around the room and use both the bomb and the sword makes this fight quite interesting. So after 3 hits, you think your job's done, you go into the next room, ready to collect your dungeon item, but Master Stealtho has stolen it, and you've got to find them again to defeat them and claim what's rightfully yours. Now I think this is just such a great twist to a dungeon, and it builds some character into an otherwise standard mini-boss. If I had one nitpick, it would be that all 4 fights are exactly the same, and perhaps it would have been nice to increase the challenge, but look, it's still a lot of fun and it's incredibly rewarding once you finally defeat them for good. So that's it, all 16 mini bosses in Link's Awakening ranked from worst to best. If you think your favourite was hard done by, then convince me in the comments as to why it should have been higher. I've got a Skyward Sword ranking video coming soon, as well as our next Link's Awakening video focusing on the nightmares, so make sure you check back in to see those videos. If you like to see Pokemon plushies and figurines get up to random shenanigans, then check out my older videos and stay tuned for a brand new mini-series coming out next month. Until then, stay safe, stay kind, and I'll see you next time on the Hungry Heracross.